Afternoon and a very warm welcome to the inaugural lecture of The Author's Voice, a new online lecture program jointly convened by the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, New Jersey and Gorgias Press. For those who don't know me, I'm Sabine Schmidtke, the permanent faculty at the School of Historical Studies representing Near Eastern Studies, and co-hosting today's event with me is Maria Mercedes Tuya, representing Digital Scholarship at the IS, and George Kiras, editor-in-chief of Gorgias Press.
We're glad that you can join us and hope you're as excited as we are to learn of Professor Wardini's journey for this project. He will be speaking for about 45 minutes and then there will be 30 minutes for questions. Please submit all your questions via the chat and address them to all panelists. You can even send them during the talk. Due to the number of attendees joining us, we cannot acknowledge the raised hands. So please use the chat for any questions or comments.
It is really a pleasure to welcome everybody to this inaugural lecture of the series. I am George Kiraz, as Sabina mentioned, editor-in-chief of Gorgias Press. And it is really my pleasure to introduce today our first inaugural speaker, Elie Wardini. Elie studied Semitic languages at the University of Oslo. In fact, I learned of Elie's work much earlier on when I was a graduate student in Cambridge doing computational linguistics in Syriac, and Elie at the time was working on neologisms, basically on 20th century text. Hardly anybody works on 20th century texts. And I was under the impression that he was doing a PhD dissertation on the topic. Well, it was a master's thesis that sounded like a PhD dissertation. It was really an excellent piece. Today, Elie is professor of Arabic in the Department of Asian, Middle Eastern and Turkish Studies at Stockholm University in Sweden. His research focuses on Semitic languages, especially the Aramaic-Arabic interface and contact from a diachronic and sociolinguistic perspective. His major publications, beside those on the Quran that we will hear about today, are on Syriac neologisms, which he much later published also with Gorgias, and Lebanese place names, which was published with Peter's publishers. I just would like to pause here to lament the sudden and unexpected death of the director of Peter's publishers, Mr. Paul Peters. Everybody is in shock. His funeral will be this Saturday. In addition to Elie's interest in the languages, culture, and history of the Near East, Elie is engaged with discussions on subjects such as ethnicity, nationalism, continuity and change, and cultural exchanges. The works that we will be hearing about today are about 25 volumes, which Elie produced in under 4 years. This is a record, at least for Gorgias Press. So we will all now have to attempt to try to beat Elie and write more than 25 books in 4 years. So thank you again, Elie, for being our first speaker, and the floor is yours.
Thanks. I'm Elie Wardini. I'm actually in Oslo, not in Lebanon. The picture behind me is my village, Bikfaya, in Lebanon. In those days, we can just dream of being wherever we want to be. I'm going to share my screen and start the presentation. There is a lot to talk about. I will try to touch shortly on the issues, but we will have time, I hope, to later for discussion. So I'm going to discuss with you today a little bit the path that I took in order to how I came to work with the Quran and produce a database, a keyword database of it. It started by a question on Arabic in contact with other languages, especially Aramaic, and the role of the Quran. So we will see how I worked with that. I thought of having a parallel text between the Quran and the Sirah of Ibn Ishaq, or Ibn Hisham's edition of it. We will look a little bit at the structure and what is a Quran relational database. We will look more specifically at parts of the database, the data entry, the relational data, and the output. I have examples, so it will not be, there will be some technical jargon, but I'll try to keep it as easy to understand as possible. I don't know, I mean, one of the issues here is joining the philologist together with the computational engineer. So one of the questions one can ask, and we do not have a lot of information about Arabic before Islam. There are some inscriptions, but not the amount of data that we have in order to be able to have descriptions, grammars, lexicons, or whatever. It's very limited. In the last 20 years, many scholars have been working seriously within archaeology, literature, history of religion, and the old idea of the Arabian Peninsula being isolated from the rest of the world has been shown to be not true at all. In fact, there are the number of Aramaic inscriptions, the archaeology is uncovering a lot of interesting stuff on life on the Arabian Peninsula before Islam. And so my work here, the question that I'm asking, what did the Quran contribute to Arabic lexicon, is not is to be seen as part of this trend of placing the Quran, Islam, and Arabian society within its historical and context. Now, the easy question on what did the Quran contribute to the Arabic lexicon is a lot. It did contribute a lot. Actually, still contributes a lot. So the question is how and where and in which ways. And one way, there are many different ways. Many scholars have written on the foreign words in the Quran, the foreign words in Arabic. These need to be updated, though. The major works on that need to be updated. So I asked the question in saying, let's compare the Arabic of the Quran to some early Arabic texts and do a contrastive study and see, can these texts give us any clues on how the Quran has influenced the Arabic lexicon? I choose the Sirah, Ibn Ishaq's Sirah as edited by Ibn Hisham. We do not have Ibn Ishaq's text. We have Ibn Hisham's edition of it and some snippets from Tabari and others. But Ibn Ishaq is a renowned scholar, respected in his time and even today, comes from a tradition from a family with a long tradition of narrating Arabic, the history and the stories of the Arabs. So it's a good place to start, in a sense. One of the places, one of the earlier non-religious per se texts. For that, I used a digital text from Al-Maktaba Al-Shamila. Having said that, we have to, there's sort of a circular argumentation here that all texts written after Islam, meaning all Arabic texts, are influenced. So the text of the Sirah is not void of influence from the Quran. So we have to be very careful, and we cannot be naive here. We have to look at our data very carefully. For the Quran text, I have used the widely used digital text from tanzil.net. It's based on Uthmani manuscript in Medina, the Mus'haf al-Medina. Most applications that you have with the Quran, most web pages that you have with the Quran these days are based on this text. They produce different versions of the text. We will take a look here. They have the simple minimal text, or they have the text, the Uthmani text. And I have included both the simple and the Uthmani text in the database. You can see that the Uthmani text, I started off with the simple version, but then once you start looking, you see that the Uthmani text contains much more information that is not in the simple. So I thought I'll take the full thing. And here in circles, you can see that there are some differences. So what can we do? One way I'm suggesting that we can do and try to see how the Sira can help us understand is by looking at creating this parallel text. It's not still there, but working on it and see if the words in their context, both in the Quran, which is here to the left, and the Sira to the right, can we find out anything of interest here that will give us any clues? And for example, the word tur. Now, one of the reasons that I work with, you will see that I have foreign words here. These are easy. I mean, it's one thing working with the Quran, but putting the Sira into the database is a lot of work. And I haven't come so far with that. So the concentration will be on the Quran, but one easy way to just test your hypothesis is with foreign words. And tur is such a foreign word. It's an Aramaic word meaning mountain. And you wonder why is it that the Quran has the word tur? It also has the word jabal, mountain. And indeed, in the Quran, all of the occurrences of the word tur are in relation to the Israelites and Mount Sinai. Now, does the Sira use the word tur also? Yes, it does. Few times. It's attested 10 times in the Quran, only 3 times in the Sira, as far as I can tell. I still have a lot of work to do with the Sira, but as far as I can tell, 3 times in the Sira. All of them also in relation to the Israelites. Then the question is, if this is in relation to the Israelites and the Jews, why the word tur and not har? Why not the Hebrew word har Sinai instead of tur Sinai? I did a very quick search in the Talmud. Now, the Mishnah part of the Talmud is mostly in Hebrew. The Gemara commentary part is mostly in Aramaic. And my initial search resulted in really, in the Talmud, mostly they use Har Sinai. In the Targum, of course, the Aramaic translation of the Hebrew Bible is Tur Sinai. To note, though, there is a hadith where Muhammad wanted, in his communication with the Jews, wanted to make sure he understood them correctly, asked Zayd bin Thabit to go and learn Syriac in order to write and communicate with the Jews in Arabia. And this seems then to be an indication. It's one part of an argument that seemingly the Jews in Arabia were using Aramaic. So that the word tur has come in the context of the Israelite, the stories of the Israelites in connection with the Jews. Is it so? We do not have any direct information here other than the indirect information that the Jews seem to be having using Aramaic in Arabia also. Another example is the name Yunus, or even the name Ilyas. Yunus is the Greek form. Why does the Quran use the Greek form of Yunus? In the Quran, it is in reference to the prophet Jonas. Yunus is the Greek form. Yeah, okay, we look at the Sira. There are actually a lot of mentions of Yunus in the Sira 12. Most of them in reference to Yunus al-Nahawi, the grammarian. He is, after Islam, but seemingly he was called Yunus. There's also a story in the Sira about Addas, a gentleman who met Muhammad, and Muhammad tells him, "What's your religion and where are you from?" And Addas says, "I'm a Christian from Nineveh." And Muhammad says, "Yeah, this is the town of Yunus bin Matta." And Addas says, how come do you know about Yunus? And so he says, "Yeah, he was a prophet like me, and I like him very much." So seemingly the name Yunus was in use at the time. It wasn't strange to them, or, "Oh my God, how I should." Seems like the name. The same with Elias. In the Quran, all the references are to the prophet Elias, Elijah. In the Sira, nearly all of them are in reference to Elias ibn Mudar, who, according to their own chronology, is sometime before the Common Era, but then is one of the ancestors. His mentions are in the ancestry of Muhammad. So somebody in the ancestry of Muhammad was called Elias. Now, whether this is factual or not is not as relevant as much as it seems like the names Yunus and Elias were used in the region, and these are the forms that were taken. There is no special reason. There doesn't seem to be a special reason why the Quran introduced the Greek forms. They just took, seemingly it just took the forms that were present. This is the idea. There is a lot, I've worked a lot with the Quran. I haven't worked as much with the Sira, but this is the idea, that how I started putting together this database. Structurally, the database is such that you form, you create a relation. I'm going to speak a little bit more about that, but you create a relational database. On the one hand, if you can look at it here, it is mirrored. On the one hand, you have the ayahs, the words of the Quran, the unique forms of the Quran, all related to certain words like Yunus, Tur, or any Jabal, or any other word. And in the same place, you relate the words from the Sira, and you get what you see here in the bottom that I showed you earlier, is that you can then relate these two databases together and present them in such a way as you can click on the ayah, you click on the Sira, you can find the context, what is the big story about it. You go the line before, the line after to find the story about it. This is, of course, a simplified version of the database. It's much more complex. I'm just showing the structure, and I have squared in the Quran part here, because once I started working with the Quran, I found out that, and this is how I shifted from the simple Tanzil text to the Uthmani text. There is a lot of information that one could work with. And so I concentrated the last years on the Quran and on doing as much as I can on the Quran part of this database. Now, how do you go from text to a database? In fact, one can think of text as a matrix. You divide it into paragraphs, into sentences, and let's say this paragraph becomes your line. And then if you spread the words out, this text here is just meaningless. It's random text that I've copied from someplace on the internet. But you can get an idea how you can go from a paragraph into a matrix, where you can identify the position of every word. You can then enter it into a database. Of course, religious texts make it easy for us because they provide us with chapter numbers and verse numbers, surah and ayah. We're doing this, for example, with the Sira text is harder because you have long passages. You cannot just put a 2-page passage into, and if I number them on my own, it's not standard. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done on the Sira part, but for the Quran part, it's easy. You have surah, ayah, and then you take your line, your ayah becomes your line. You take your line and enter it into a table in your database. These are all your ayahs, well identified by the surah and the number of the ayah. There are 6,236. Then you take all your words, every single word in the text, and enter them in what I'm calling word instances here. These are my keywords. These are every single word in the Quran. Now, these get a unique identification. We will talk about the identification in a minute. But because they are in a matrix, you can identify each word, where it is, what it belongs, and what it is. But then you enter it into your database as your keywords. I'm doing a database of my keywords. Now, these keywords can be repeated. Just like here in this example, we have two cases of had. We don't need to sit and transcribe and tag 77,878 words. We only need to tag and transcribe had once. And so if you find all your unique conjugated and declined words and enter them into what is here I'm calling unique forms, you end up with 17,818 unique words. And now you see here, but still each word, each key still has its unique ID number, its unique address if you want. But then it is related to a unique form in this table here. Has also is then gets its place as every other form. You eliminate repetitions, and then you relate the unique form back to every instance. And one step further, had and has is not your lemma, your dictionary entry. These both will have one dictionary entry have. And since we're dealing with the Semitic language, you will have a table for the roots. And so what you're doing here, since it is a relational database, information flows from back and forth. If you add information to the root, it gets inherited by the words down in the keywords and even the ayahs. And whatever information you have about the ayahs get inherited over up to the roots. So for example, here you can see, oh, had is related to this unique form up here. This unique form up here has the lemma have. Then had here with its unique number inherits in its information. My dictionary entry is have, my root is whatever it would be. Huh? I'm in surah such and such, ayah such and such. This is my number, this is my address. And so all this information can flow back and forth, and I will be showing you how I then use it in order to generate interesting information. We have to be careful though that we have to know what we're doing. One, the lines and the ayahs is not, we have no choice in them. This is fixed. This is what the text is. From the unique forms and over, we introduce our own interpretations, our own information that we're adding. And when we're looking at the forms, for example, a form ahlaka in the Quran, we have to be careful and not just saying it looks exactly the same, then it must be exactly the same. We have to know that actually there are, even though they're identical in appearance, they're actually two different ones. Because you have ahlaka, your parents, your family, which has a different interpretation than ahlaka, to cause to perish, which has a different root, a different verb. The same with salih. There are cases where salih is a proper name, and there are cases where salih is an adjective, and these has to be identified. Another example, ahsana, both from the same root, but one is an adjective to do good or to be good, to be better. The causative form of ahsana, or he is better than. One's an adjective, and so you have to identify what you're working with and insert the information, the appropriate information. You end up with something like this. Here you have the root amana in the Quran. It is represented by 12 lemmas, 12 words, entries in the dictionary. Here you have the how often amana is represented in the text. Amana is represented by 132 unique forms, and these are attested in 879 cases, instances in the text of the Quran. And you can move this in, you can interpret this information back and forth. You can say Surah 2, verse 3, what is its unique form? You come to here. What is its lemma? You come to here. What is its root? You come to here. Which word classes that you find it, and you can go both ways. This is the strength and the benefits of having a relational database. You enter information in one small place, but everybody else inherit this information. All related items get the same information. I'm going to be talking about data entry now, but some principles. Why do we have this data entry? This is here identification. Think of it as a library. Let's say you have a library with thousands of books, but you sort of just put them there. You have no way of identifying which books do you have there. You could just as well not have the books, because you don't know. You go around, you say, oh, look, I have this book, or look, I have this book, or look, I have this book. 3 days later, you forget. You have to be able to identify what is it, which features in the text do I have? How can I identify? I also have to have the possibility of retrieving them. This is where identification and retrieving, this is where the unique ID for every word in the Quran is important. It has a unique address. I can find it. It's in a matrix. I can find every word. I go to Surah 10, Ayah 5, word 3. It's this exact same word. It cannot be any other word. And also you have to be able to do something with what you retrieve. A prerequisite for good work is knowing your data. You have to know what you're dealing with the Uthmani text that has these or these features. For example, words are separated by spaces. This is how we work these days in separating words. Linguists sort of, what is a word? And we have a difficult time defining what a word is, and the easiest one is saying anything separated by a space. But you know, in Arabic, words can contain a preposition or a pronoun. Our data also has roots. You have to provide for it. You also need to know your code. You need to know when you're programming your database, you need to know what your code, what your program is doing. You have to know why you're programming. What is your aim in doing this programming? What do you want to achieve? And I think importantly, you also need to keep clear distinction between what is your raw data and what are your interpretations. You will see in everything that I've produced from this database, anything that is in the Arabic script and is vocalized is text from the Tanzil text. You can identify it immediately. Anything that is transcribed or written in Arabic script that is not vocalized, that's my work. You can blame me. If there's an error there, blame me. Distinguishing so that you do not base your assumptions on your own interpretations rather than on your data. Know what you're doing. All this is important because there is, I learned this actually from George. in computational science, there is a saying, rubbish in, rubbish out. If you handle your data in a sloppy way, you don't know what you're doing with your data, you mix things up, your results are going to be rubbish. You're not going to get useful, good results. The same thing with your programs. Bugs in, bugs out. And you're lucky if your program tells you there is an error. The worst case scenario is your program does not identify the error that you did in your programming, and you think that you're getting results, but all what you're doing is something completely different than what you intended to do. You need to be in control, knowing what you're doing. To remedy that, you have to have a means of error detection and error correction. And one can argue, should we do it the engineer way or the philologist way? And my answer is yes, please, both. You have to do them both. So here's an example. It's the same picture above and below with a little bit different information. The text in the green box, this is our raw data. These are here the unique forms from the Tanzil text. I did not produce this. I took the Tanzil text and found unique instances or unique lists of a list of the unique forms, all the forms that are in Tanzil. This is the only data, this is the data that I just don't touch. In fact, the fields of these data do not alter. If I want to try to change something in them, I do not allow myself to change them. The fields here, those texts here that are in red, in the red circle, this is where I have my data entry. That's where I do my tagging and my transcription. I assign a lemma, a dictionary entry for the word in transcription and in Arabic text. Here, without vocalization, I assign a word class. I also, off this screen here, I assign a root. I assign a declension, which form is it in. Just a few, 5, 6 entries that I do. All the rest that you see in this box here, other than the green and the red, is generated dynamically through coding, through programming. So this tag here produces my transcription. This tag produces this Arabic form here. This tag here produces this. It produces the word pattern. It produces the word pattern of the lemma as well as the specific instance, that the specific unique form that it separates the suffixes, or here the case, and so that you end up with just the base, what I call the isolated base. Pistas, so that I can identify E at the end, definite article, the preposition, I can identify them again. Now, the philologist, and my 2 coming slides are going to think this guy is schizophrenic, but here is a discussion between the philologist in me and the engineer in me. There is I'm a philologist and a linguist, but there is a small engineer someplace. And so the philologist in me says, okay, look at it here. You've tagged and transcribed. This is the resulting transcription. It looks very well, very good. Yalla, next one. The lower part here is a case where, let's say you made a mistake, you look at it, I have a U, there should be an E, there's an error. I correct it. That's the philologist. The engineer says, hey, wait a minute. What do you do at 9 o'clock in the evening when you've been tagging and transcribing all day and you don't know if you're awake and you're asleep? Are you sure you're going to see that there is a E here and a U there and whatever? Can you guarantee that you have seen it? And of course, I cannot. Then the engineer says, let's introduce checksums. Very shortly, checksums are usually used in communication, but the short definition, checksums is a way of identifying errors. And so the ideal transcription, the perfect transcription should be a transcription that reproduces the item that you have transcribed, that is able to do so. So I have coded my program to be able to reconstruct these forms here are the reconstructions into Arabic from the code, from the transcription and the tagging. So ideally, your tag and your transcription should be able to reconstruct the text that you're transcribing. And indeed, if you do your transcription and tagging correctly and you code them correctly, you can reproduce. You can see here, no problem. Here I put a U, your produced text gives you an U. And then I do what computers do best is identify match patterns and flag. Are they perfectly identical? It flags it as okay. Is there any difference between what I have produced and my original text? It flags it. It tells me, look, there is something wrong here. In fact, if you look at Bil-Qistasi here in the simple and Qistasi in the Uthmani is in red. It is flagged. I have also added a flag to see if the Uthmani text is completely identical to the simple text. The text here is black and white as the simple. But if there is any difference, it gets flagged. I have a small circle here, which I can go and search, find all the cases where the Uthmani text differs from the simple text. Okay, and the same thing here. If you're at 9 o'clock in the evening and you're making mistakes and you don't even notice it, your program will flag it for you because you've asked it to do so. And then you can come back the next day and see, oh, which ones here that are red, I have this dot here and this dot here. Anyone that is not matching, I can find them and correct. So that you have to make sure that you handle your data correctly when you're introducing it into the database. But once you're introducing your own interpretations, you must make sure that you're not introducing errors of your own. And that's what the system here is. When you're doing errors, you may not know your data very well, your tagging or transcription or your codes. You need to go to the source of the error and not just do simple corrections that are actually not dealing with the error that existed. What is true for words is also true. I went ahead of myself here. Here's another case where the engineer will not help. Tabaddala. If you were to transcribe the word tabaddala as a perfect form, it would be perfectly correct. That's what is written in the Arabic text. And then here the philologist gains upper hand and say, yeah, you know what, let's look at it in context. It's a very good tabaddala, to be exchanged or to change, to exchange is a very good word and perfect. But the philologist will say, no, let me go and look at this word in context. Here's where building a keyword in context database is important. This word here is attested once in this form. And this page here lists all, if it was attested 5 times, it would have listed them all. Here, all the forms of form 5 of tabaddala are listed. And you look, laka, second person singular, masculine. Tabaddala, third person masculine, singular. A'jabaka, second person singular. You start thinking, wait a minute. Laka nisa'u, this is an ayah about the wives of Muhammad. Laka nisa'u, and huwa tabaddala bihinna walau a'jabaka. There's something wrong. The syntax, the context of this word here cannot be a third person perfect. Now you wonder, is there a mistake I did? Is there a mistake in the Tanzil text? And indeed, I found many cases where the ta sequence is reduced to ta. You do your homework. I look in the hadith, I look in the tafsir, I look in the dictionaries, I look in modern sources, I look in translations. And indeed, I use al-Jalalain. They're rather late, but one of the reasons I use al-Jalalain is because they have a lot of grammatical comments in their tafsir. And look, and lo and behold, بترك إحدى التاءين في الأصل, by dropping one of the ta's. Now, these, I actually went to Tabari, which I use extensively. In this case, going to Lisan al-Arab would not help. I want to see, I looked at Tabari. Tabari does not give a grammatical explanation. He gives a semantic explanation. He says, there are those who say, no, tubaddil. Others say tabadala, tubadila. He disagrees with them and says tabaddala is the right one because of this and that, but all his interpretations are the second person masculine singular in the imperfect. Now, they're not always right. It doesn't mean because Al-Jalalain say it's right. What this tells me is they saw the same thing that I saw. In this case, I don't have examples in this. One other place to go is Corpus Quranicum, our colleagues in Germany who have variants reading. They have listed the variant readings of all the ayahs and all the words. And there you can see that most of the readings are actually tabaddalas here, but there are some that sort of are doubting whether, you can see that there is questions about it. And all I need to know here is that they've seen the same thing that I have seen. And actually going to these sources sometimes show you something that you have not seen. They've seen something that I haven't seen. So what is true for words is also true for ayahs. Again, here in the green box is the Tanzil ayah as is. It's raw data, no touching, no changing, no anything. In the red boxes here are my reconstructed data. I take these words, I know their addresses, and reposition them according to their address. The algorithm here is difficult and takes a lot of time for the computer to do it, but it's basically this. Take ayah, surah 1, start with first ayah 1, start with word number 1 and list all the words after it. Go to the second ayah and do the same thing. Huh? They usually take a couple of days to finish with these algorithms. But what I did is then I reconstructed the Arabic text and do exactly the same thing. I have a checksum. One, you do the philologist part, you look at your transcription. One of the reasons why I do this reconstruction is because I can take, with my reconstructed ayah, I can say instead of the Arabic raw text, dhalika, please insert its transcription. And then I can produce my transcription of all these texts based on my reconstruction of the ayah. Now I need to make sure there are no errors. So I place the Tanzil text, I place my reconstructed text, I take in Quran.com, which I use a lot. I believe they use Tanzil text also. And I have my transcription, and you go through them one by one. But then there is an engineer also who has a small checksum here. If the reconstruction text is not perfectly identical to the Tanzil text, it will flag it. There is an error. So you go through your text, you look at the Tanzil text, is it the same as what I'm doing here? Is my transcription working? You sort of assure that your work is on the right track. Here's an example of how I code. I'm not going to talk a lot about coding. There's a lot of coding. I'd say I'm an advanced beginner. Maybe after with this work on the database, I'm a beginner intermediate. And I work on need to learn basis. I don't want to learn everything. I learn what I need to do. But what this code here you have in front of you does, it does two things. It identifies and assigns the word number to each keyword in every ayah. Why is this important? If you look at our raw data gives us the surah, it gives us the ayah, the surah number, it gives us the ayah number, and it fills in the row, but it doesn't give us any information on the number each word has. You have to assign it to it. You can do it manually, and I calculated it would probably take a whole year just adding in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, an impossible work and prone to have errors. So what you do with this code is you identify the word in the position of the word in the ayah, you assign it a number. Of course, I went through to check. I'll show you how I can look at this and see what that my code is working correctly. The second thing it does is it identifies and isolates the text before and the text after. Just conceptually, it's not that difficult. If my word is number 4, then to the right of it, there is 5, 6, 7, 8, and to the left of it, there's 1, 2, 3, right? But it gives me hold of them. It puts them in a box that I can use for every single word of the 77,878 words in the Quran. Some of these codes, some codes I have run took 4 days to finish. I have a good computer with 32 gigabytes of RAM, and it takes computing time. So this is the code. I'll not spend much time. So what do we get at the end? Most of my data entry has been on the unique forms, but let's go and see what happened to the keywords now. Here's in the green box again is the information we have from the Tanzil text. We have the surah number, the ayah, and the actual word in the simple form and in the Uthmani. Here we have the whole ayah in which this word is attested. All the rest on this page is generated dynamically through coding based on some entries I have on the unique forms. You can see it gets a transcription, it gets a word class, it gets a root, it gets a pattern, a word pattern. You have the word here marked in its context. This number 6 here says, I want 6 words before and 6 words after where available. Now this ayah here has actually 7 words before and only 6 after. The idh here is not included. If I had 7 here, it would be included. It has the text, the same text, but instead of having the Arabic words exchanged with the lemmas, I just put these here as examples. I have the text as word class. You get the syntax of your ayah, the context of this word with its syntax. Here, this number 3 here defines how much, this defines the extent of the collocations. How many words do I want to include in the cluster around the word? How many co-occurring words do I want? I say 3. And this here in red is the result of the code I showed on the previous page. You get a unique identifier. It's ayah 18, surah 18, ayah 60, word number 8, and its first occurrence, because you may have the exact same form occurring several times. You have to account for that. These are the words to the right of your keyword. These are the words to the left of your keyword. These are put together here in a good separated. You can identify what's before, what's after. What do you want to do with them? What's true? Are you keeping time, George? What's true for, what's true for the word, for your keyword is also true for the ayah. Here's my raw data. Here are all what's in the red here I bring in, of course, you're a scholar, you don't think you know everything. You have to see what others have said. I bring in Jalalain, I bring other translations. I have other words. I have Corpus Quranicum, I have the tafsir, I can go to the ayah with the Tabari, Ibn Kathir, Lisan al-Arab, any dictionary you want. You have Al-Bahth al-Arabi is really good, but their webpage has been down now. I use it as a way to enter to find where in the printed edition you have of Lisan al-Arab you have. Anyway, so you have all these things. The rest of the data here are, the red ones are my input. All the others are generated dynamically through coding. One example to see, is my code giving me the right numbers, giving the words the right number? Here, the word count of the Arabic ayah is 7. And I look here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I have listed here the words that are there in the order that they come. This is the list of the words as I have in my unique forms. And here is my reconstruction. And indeed, it fits. Indeed, it fits, not by chance. I have to go and make sure that it fits. Ooh, thanks. Wow, it fit. No, you have to make sure, otherwise you're not working correctly. You have to make sure that every single word, every single ayah fits. And so you make your searches, you make your queries, you decide what is it I want to get out? What is it I want to try to analyze? This is not analysis. The analysis comes on top of that. You get out the data and you start to analyze. You do your query, you do your search, you decide what you want to pull out of this data for analysis, and then you send it to a tag text file. And how this image here becomes a beautiful book is a lecture of itself. Okay, you start getting your outputs. I use FileMaker Pro. It does do some nice formatting, but you have to send it out to a usable. I use Nisus, a word processor. I use Nisus. I think it's one of the better ones that handles Arabic. So what did we get out of? Until now, did we get out of this database? In 2020, the whole Quran in transcription. It's published also as an ebook. Anyone who needs, for those who know the Quran by heart but cannot read the Arabic script, anyway, I think there are many uses for it. It's available. And then we come to the work with Gorgias Press. And I think there's very much an interesting, I think it's very interesting. I think Gorgias Press thinks it's interesting, otherwise they wouldn't have published. But we have, in 2020, there are 2 series that were published. Keywords in Context, 5 volumes, and Word Lists, 3 volumes. Let me start with the word lists. There are 3 lists. Every unique form in the Quran is listed alphabetically. And you can see its frequency. Now, I've marked here Ibrahim. You can see how Ibrahim is spelled, written in the Quran. All the forms, everything. This is the word list. You get my interpretation on the other side. I've interpreted as the lemma, the dictionary entry Ibrahim, with the root Abram. My arguments, I had many arguments between the descriptive linguist in me and the etymologist. I think the descriptive linguist has won most of the times. I also sometimes, every time consulted the classical dictionaries to see which roots did they assign. I didn't always agree with them, but in general, my thought is you should not be a specialist in Semitic languages in order to read that. You should know Arabic. So I have the list of all the forms that are in the Quran. Then another list are all the lemmas that are in the Quran. And then all the roots that are in the Quran. This is the word list. the keywords in context, that's a 5-volume work. Every single word, 77,000, every single, in all those works that I've done now, other than the transcription, I have worked on adjectives, nouns, proper nouns, and adverbs. Otherwise, it becomes too big, too complicated. I have to take parts of it at a time. I think the number is 55,000 something. Now, adjectives, nouns, proper nouns, and verbs listed, sorted by root, and I do that. I sort them by root in order to put similar words near each other. Otherwise, you get amana under the alif and mu'min under mim. You cannot see the common denominator, the usage. I sort them by declension. I sort them by verbal forms and nominal forms, and then by the attested unique form, and then you get every single one listed. You can see every word in context. In a concordance, yes, actually, I think it's a little bit more than a concordance. You really have much more here to analyze than you would do. And here, for example, you have the example, you can look and see, I mean, you have for qabl, you have qablu, and you have qabli. And you can look and see in the context, yeah, you know, you have min qablu and you also have min qabli. I have my ideas why this is so, others have their ideas why this is so. What are the patterns? What is it that we're seeing? How is qabl? You can do it semantically, you can do it. And the example I have on my next screen is phraseology. Alam tara is a very common word, a very common phrase. More common, but similar. Alam tara, alam yaraw, but also ara'ayta or afara'ayta. And it seems to me like this is a phrase which is very, very commonly used in finger pointing. The ones in green here is, haven't you seen that God is the creator, right? I have them marked in green here. Or haven't you seen that God is the punisher, the ones in red? Alam tara an arsalna ash-shayatina ala al-kafirin, I send the devils on the blasphemers. Or alam yaraw kam ahlakna qablahum min al-qurun, how many tribes we have caused to be destroyed before that. Or you have the God who is praised. أن الله يسبح له من في السماء والأرض. Or the mighty, the Almighty God. This phraseology here reminds me very much of my favorite book in the Bible, the book of Job. Long passages in the book of Job start with, who do you think you are? Haven't you seen where God did? He created the horse, he created the whatever. There is a lot to work with this data. And my intention is produce this data raw and give people the chance to work with them. I'll be doing my own work, but then everybody else has the chance to look at this data and see what they want to do. In print now is keyword collocations. That's every adjective. I think, if I'm correct, in the next month, 2 months, 3 months, maybe it will come out. The manuscript is, I think we've come quite a way. Keyword collocations. This is every adjective, noun, proper noun, and verb in the Quran listed together with co-occurring words. Here it is 2 words to the right and 2 words to the left. What are the words that co-occur with every other word? These calculations took 4 days. Think of it. You put your algorithm, and it has to take 77,000 words and check to see if they're a noun, adjective, proper noun, and then find which noun, adjective is 77 times 77. It took 4 days. You start it, and then you go take many beers before it finishes. Huh? So you have every word with every other word in which co-occurs. What do we get out of it? I think a lot. I think there's a lot to be seen in there. But just as an example, the in syllable is very common as an ending for the ayahs. What about rhyme in the Quran? Huh? And we know this is nothing new to anybody who has done any study. If you look at to the right here, mustaqim, you see mustaqiman, mustaqiman, mustaqiman. You know, this is the pausal form. You read it as pausa, they all rhyme, no matter what the case is. But in the case of mustaqim, you see that they're not always at the end of those of the ayah. Is it so? I'm not saying it is. You know, we have to do our study, we have to do our work, and the material will be there in print for everybody to see. Can we use this feature as a mechanism to find, in corpus linguistics, they call them chunks, words that fit with each other. So, إن هذا صراطي مستقيما فاتبعوه ولو تتبعوا السبل. Is there a break there? Can I use this feature? And as an example, another case here, you will see that sirati and is in parallel with subul in the same ayah. We notice this, of course, in biblical Hebrew, but I think we notice it too few times in other poetry, in Arabic poetry, for example. I think we should be noticing it more. On the other hand, you have sirat in a similar context as tariq. Now, of course, sirat, subul, tariq all mean the same thing. Why sirat in the Latin word? This is one of the answers I want to come to. In the keyword collocations, again, if you're interested in dialectology, you have tatayyara, but you have ittayyara. Yattayyirun, and I can assure you that I have looked up these in the tafsir and the dictionaries to make sure that I'm not implementing that. The text has that, and this is where I sometimes disagree with the dictionaries. But you would be surprised, especially Tabari, on how often he says, oh, this is a Greek word. Or he says, oh, this is the dialect of I don't know where. Or these two different readings, this is from Kufa and this is from you know, different readers read differently depending on which area they come from. The later commentators don't like this very much. But, you know, there have been a couple of papers lately on dialectal variation in the Quran. And here you get all your material bang in your face. Interesting. How do you say tatahara in Lebanese? How do you say it how do you say it, George, in your common?
الطهر.
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 And that's the form you have. You would think that you cannot have this form in the Quran, do you? That's the dialectal form, but here it is. For the word daik, it co-occurs with the verb kana, it's a verb kana, but in the very exact same context. Once it's taku, once it's takun. I have my ideas. Anybody is able to look at this material here and see what is it that I have, what can I find, what is it I can find. Semantics, poetry, anything you want to do, grammatical. Hopefully next year, in the making, there is a series on collocation frequencies. Inshallah. This is a little bit wider than the keyword collocation, since it includes 3 words to the right and 3 words to the left. And they're sorted alphabetically, and within each word, and here you see they're sorted alphabetically by the lemma, and the collocation is not, you'll not find the forms here, you will find just the dictionary entries, are sorted by frequency. For anyone doing history of religion, it becomes interesting that dhulma is most frequently associated with nur, darkness with light, zahir with batin, the visible, the seen with the unseen, as-sama wal-ard, the heaven and earth, with Allah, of course, and khalaqa and Rabb, and bain. There is a lot, it's a very common phrase, as-sama wal-ard wa ma bain. Another interesting here is dun, other than. Of course, Allah is the very most common word in the whole Quran. But it's interesting here, other than God, and then invoke, dua, da'a, wali, ally, ittakhada, to take, and abada. So what more can we do? For my part, the next are prepositions and adverbs. This is rather prepositions and adverbs. My real question here is, how do you present the data? It's easy to get the data out, but you need to present it in such a way that is meaningful. I need to think about it, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done. The pronouns is tricky because you may have more than one pronoun in a word. You have to work hard to make sure that you're getting the right results. Conjunctions and particles, the same thing. You can have several particles or conjunctions in the same word. You have to think, but that's in the making. 2 years from now, who knows? Another is already in the database are your word patterns. You can look at syllabic structure, or you can create a grammar. You can create a corpus-based grammar of the entire Quran, taking the entire Quran into consideration. You can, here I've taken in this table here and here, I just have 2 words, balagha and kataba. And then it tells you which forms do they occur in, and which word patterns, and how do they then one distribute, but which one gets yablughu and which one yablughu and yaktubu both get an u, which ones get an e and which ones get an a. You know, you can do a lot on morphology, phonology, whatever. Semantics, I haven't still touched the semantics because all I've done is I have identified the lemma, but then you can thematize what are the themes that are associated with these words, and can you get any patterns? Can you associate these patterns or words or forms or anything? Let's say you tag your surahs and your ayahs according to the different chronologies that are proposed for the Quran, early, middle, late, and see, are there any features within the Quran that support the one chronology or the other, or maybe propose something else? I don't know. This is work that has been done with other texts. Why not also the Quran? The syntax of the Quran, you have all your ayahs that can be transformed into syntactical patterns. Rhyme and rhythm, there's a lot to do. And our time is over, and not much time to do these things. This was my presentation. I'm ready to answer questions if you have.
Thank you very much, Elie. That was really fascinating and really very, very inspiring in many respects. As we said before, as Maria said before, please put your comments and questions into the chat, and then George will read them out for Elie to discuss. Thank you.
So let's start with a computational question. It's about URIs, or what's called Uniform Resource Identifiers. The question is from Raymond Lecht. A question on the IDs given to unique forms, lemmas, and roots. Are these IDs given by the Quran Key project internally, or have you adopted IDs of any other digital lexicography project? The background of this question is the question of how to prepare data for coordinating and eventually interlinking forms and lemmas, between various projects.
I have not. I have looked at many projects. This is now the strength of this is that any of these can be then in any of my IDs can be then synchronized with any other ID. It's not difficult. Now, my IDs here, especially for the unique forms, I give them a unique ID as a number, but my relationship to the others is based on the form itself. Otherwise, you have to do triple and quadruple work. So my unique form identifies which forms are similar to it and flags them as related to me, and then gives them if I were to do it, unique ID has to know which unique ID on it does find out subsequently that this is the word I have these, I'm in relationship with these words 1, 2, 3, but this relationship is based on matching forms rather than matching IDs. Otherwise, you will have to tag every single word, every single unique form, you have to tag them with an ID that is understandable. I use exact match of the pattern.
Zabini has a question.
But it's completely possible, one, to export all this into another database and connect to other databases with other IDs. And even I did not mention the transcription, but this is computer science. We can do whatever we want in one way or another.
Zabini, do you want to ask your question directly since you're on this?
Okay. Well, as you were presenting, I had basically two questions. One is, to what extent, I mean, people are nowadays working on all the early Quran fragments and manuscripts, and it's really, amazing what's out there. To what extent are you able to integrate the material we have from the early manuscripts into your database? And to what extent are you doing that or want to do that? And the other thing is that, because you started out that you also want to use this database to compare with early literature, like Ibn Hisham. And if you do the same as you do for the Quran for other literature, like the Sirah and possibly other early texts, how do you tackle the problem that we don't have critical editions?
Yeah, let me start with the first one. I use FileMaker Pro, and FileMaker Pro allows you to have portals to tap into IPI's web pages of others. One example that I use is Corpus Coranicum, because they list variants, and you can code your web page, your card, if you want, to find the exact surah and ayah in Corpus Coranicum. And my intention is not only the manuscripts, but also I'm thinking, I mentioned, for example, that all other types of metadata, what other stories, what other issues, what other can you relate? And even though I had another question that one, and I work on my own, but should this become a team effort? But the positive part is that this is the systems that we use are flexible, that we can do transformation. So if we can transform our transcriptions, many colleagues propose, for example, to transcribe in IPA. Why are we doing the traditional? You know what? It's not a problem. You write an algorithm, you change your transcription. You connect to whichever, and this is, I hope that with time I will be able to, and maybe with other colleagues, be able to connect my database to others, and then a unique number in my database will have an address, a connection to a unique number in another database, back and forth. I think another question is whether this should be a web-based one to make it more available or not. We can discuss this later. What was your second question? Oh, with others. That's my problem. I mean, that's one of the issues why I'm late with a Sira, because you have, I took the one from Al-Maktaba Shamila, and I found the printed edition of it. One other issue, one major issue, not only we don't have critical, there is not enough care in the digital reproduction of these texts as there is with the Quran text. So you have spelling mistakes, you have paragraph changes, and you have to deal with that. The text is not vocalized, you're transcribing. I mean, if you take the unique forms in the Quran and you take the unique forms in the Sira, the Quran has 77,000 words, the Sira has 200,000 something. And if you take the forms, it can be kataba, kattaba, kutiba, kutub, or whatever. You have to really work much harder in order to identify them. And still, you're dependent on this one edition, which came out from some library. We don't have the digital texts. So what I'm doing now is, one, I concentrated on the Quran. I think there's a lot to do there. And I'm, working little by little on the Sira. And I'm saying to myself, that's what I have. If we have another text, we will connect it to it and see how we can correct. Just as I started with the simple Tanzil text and then thought, oh, I really need to put the other text there instead. We will be able to reconnect. The hardest part is not only the critical, but there is no consensus on dividing in chapters and paragraphs. So if I give a unique number, like George, my unique numbers are surah, ayah, word, number, occurrence. I cannot understand anybody else giving them any other unique number for your word. That's the obvious one. Now, that's why in the question, the person who asked correctly, he said, in your unique forms, you're giving them because the actual word have a unique number, whether we don't have the same thing with the other literature. Not only we don't have the critical text, we don't have any consensus on how to identify a paragraph and what is part of the text and what is the subtitle that the author, the editor put in. Al-Mujallad al-Awwal, did Ibn Hisham write Al-Mujallad al-Awwal in his book? I doubt it. But in my text, there is an ayah called Al-Mujallad al-Awwal, and the first volume. And this makes it much more difficult to deal with these texts than the Quran. Though I think we work with what we have and see. I mean, I try to have a system of numbering that corresponds to a certain edition. And if we get any better text digitalized later, we'll see what we can do.
We have a question from Gail Ramsey. This question is more about the reception of scholarship by the Muslim community. The question starts with a reminder of Taha Hussein's work on Ash'ar al-Jahili in the 1920s and how it was not accepted. And if I recall, Taha Hussein was under pressure to retract what he said. So the question is it unproblematic or natural to conduct a study such as yours on the language, text, vocabulary, grammar of the Quran today? What reactions have you had?
I haven't had many reactions yet. I mean, they're still fresh out of the box. But I I do what I'm going to answer, I do it for different reasons, but it is also an answer to the question. I differentiate between the raw data and my interpretations. So that if you have a case where it says "tahara" in the Quran, I don't speculate that this is there. I just list it and say there is a tahara. I didn't mark it in any way that this is a dialectal variation. You can read it, and then my analysis of it later becomes my responsibility. They can argue with me. But the way that the text is produced now and the way I work is I have to be 100% loyal to my raw data. And my raw data has the tahara, yattaharun. Most grammars, for example, would just say, this is a special form, we drop it. You don't have it in the grammar books. We have it in Biblical Hebrew, we have in Aramaic, any of those special forms, we sort of keep them to the side. We take the standard forms. I say it's not my responsibility. This is what the text said. This is the Uthmani text. This is the Denzil text. I haven't changed one single vowel in it. I've just ordered them. And then you ask me what is a tahara, I'll give you my opinion. This is my interpretation. So I think this is the correct scholarly way of doing it, but this also is an answer to someone who thinks, how come you're saying there's dialect in the Quran? I said, I don't know that there's dialect in the Quran. This form is in the Quran, right or wrong? Yes, let's discuss what it is. Whether I get into trouble or not, I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think so.
We have a question from Rosanka. Have you considered some special math theories for A, syntactical analysis, B, semantic representation of the lexicon of phrases, let's say, example, NPs and VPs. And the third item, mapping between syntax and semantics. And he says that I think that your work will be excellent input for the interaction between these three domains, between the syntactic, the semantic, and the mapping domains.
Rosanka, she's also my colleague, Rosanka. These are now my need to learn list. The implementation of, I have tried to, not that I have implemented them in these books, but I have algorithms which I have done myself, but I need to learn because frequency in itself is not interesting. Let's say you have Allah that is God 2,800 times. And then the next word is 600 times. If you put them and you look at frequency, you think that all these other words are not important compared. You want to look at frequency, relative weighted frequency, not only, and also in syntactical terms, how I have proximity, how far or close they are. Not only do I take the words that are 2 words to the right, 2 words to the left, but I also weight them. So I weight them in my, here in the books, I weight them with my sorting. The words that are closer come first in the list, the words that are farther come later in the list. But I think that I should be able to find a way of finding out, is there relevance to this distance and how to interpret it. And this is on my need to learn list, to be able to draw these maps without with this data and generate good results. I don't know how to do it right now, but I learn. I have gray hair, but I still can learn a couple of tricks.
We have one more question.
Or my colleagues can.
A question from Michael Muthraik. I'm sorry, I'm butchering all the names. Thank you for your lectures. It was very interesting indeed. My question, do you think of adding the etymology of the Quranic words, the lemata, as well to your lists?
I have a list of to-dos. I don't have it here. We do have a book where the etymologies, I forget the author's name. When you read it, it's open. You have to read it this way. Yes, most of my work has been on etymology, Lebanese place names and neologisms and Syriac, and the etymologist in me has been really fighting to come out. And yes, that's why also I have sorted by root, not sorted by lemma. Most of my work. How can we see these words interact? I did not add them here, but this is very high on my list. I have an etymological dictionary. I'm not going to reproduce. It's really good work, what is already there. I have to find another etymological something of the Quran than what our colleague has done before me. I forget his name.
Somebody answered a comparative lexical study of the Quranic Arabic by Martin Zamit.
Exactly, it's a really good work.
Yeah.
So I don't want to reproduce that. I want to link to it to see if I come to the same conclusions as him. But I want to try to see more in the type connecting to what the Quran has, more to the type what that Ruzanka has asked. And also answering my question, what did the Quran introduce into Arabic? And an easy example would be, I'm not sure I know the answer, but an easy example is this. In English, we distinguish between a messenger and an apostle. So if someone comes to us and say, there's a messenger here to talk to you, say, oh, who has a message to give me? But if they say there's an apostle here to talk to you, you'd think, oh my God. But Swedish has chosen to say, for the word apostle, we'll take the Greek word. We'll not get the semantic content of the Greek word apostle, meaning a religious person, into our messenger. We will take another word. But Aramaic, Greek, and Arabic have chosen to take the semantic content of the religious content and put it into the same word, right? And so what would be interesting to do with early texts as the Sirah, but also within the Quran itself, how are these semantic features, how do they connect to the other parts of the text, to this ayah numbers, to chronology, to the place, and within the Quran and outside the Quran. Like I said, there's a lot of work to do, and etymology. Like I said, I worked a lot with it. It's very tricky, and one can make a lot of mistakes working with etymology. But if you sort of get the trend of it and work seriously with it, it's really interesting. And the word Rasul today, you would hardly say in Arabic of a messenger, I sent you a Rasul, because immediately you think of the religious connotation. Now, does the Sirah use the word Rasul? I know that the Sirah used the word Rasul as a messenger. I don't have enough information to tell you that it doesn't use it as a religious connotation. It seems like the Greeks have done it to us. The Syriac has taken from Greek. I don't know. So.
Yeah, I have an observation. I was looking at the numbers, and as you were showing us your slides, I was going back 20, 30 years ago when I was in the database. I noticed that there is a similar ratio between roots, lemmas, maybe not unique forms, because Arabic has case endings, so you will end up with far more unique forms than to lemmas, that is. But it was interesting to see that the ratio of roots to lexemes more or less is there.
And does this ratio change from section of the Quran to another? Does this ratio change if I'm reading another Arabic text? Huh?
Yeah,
You see
that
what
would
I
be,
mean? There is a lot to do here. I mean, we know we've done it with the biblical text, we've done it with classical text, the dictionary, the lexicon of a certain author, the semantics of a certain author. You sort of know that this text was written by such and such, or not written by such and such, because they use these and these words, right? There's no reason why we cannot implement this here.
yeah.
Phraseology connected to thematics, connected to syntax, connected to ideas and concepts. And I'm not afraid. I did work on my own, but and I'm not ashamed of it. I did my work, but I'm optimistic because with the programs that we use now, we're not like one is in outer space and the other one is in. We can connect relatively easily. The difficulty of putting this, making it available though on the web is another question, but connecting to other projects is not difficult.
Thank you so much, Elie and Maria. Do you have some slides to show at the end? Yeah, well, we would like to thank everyone, and you see here on the screen the upcoming the second talk in this series. The beauty of this series is that it's going to be extremely diverse in content, and that expresses the diversity of research, both that is published by Gorgias, but also the diversity of research that is done at the Institute of Advanced Study by all the visiting scholars and the members who come every year. So you have the date, June 17th, the goddess Isis and the kingdom of Meroe by Solange Ashby, who's an adjunct assistant professor of Bernard College. We would invite all of you to register. And Zabine and Maria, if you would like to say something in conclusion.
Thank you so much, Professor Wardini. It was super interesting and amazing to see all the work that it looks so easy afterwards, but all the work that goes in the behind. My hats off to you, and keep going. Don't stop. And thank you to all those who joined us.
Thank you very much for everyone who was here. We very much look forward to see you again at June 17th. Goodbye.